Meet Frits. He, his wife, and daughter chose Portugal in a slightly unusual way.
I really wanted to go somewhere where we all had the same disadvantage.
On a scouting trip to Porto, they made an impulsive decision.
Yeah, we did it. And then we went back home and we're like, what did we do? Anyway.
He opens up on buying off plan.
Was it delivered in 2019?
Well, it was delivered in 2019, but it's Portugal.
Yeah.
So
He sees the pros here,
some things in Portugal are really, really well organized.
but also recognizes the cons.
Some things take a little bit longer. Yes.
They've made a big life decision,
We will retire here.
Okay.
Yeah.
and he explains why, including this.
Portugal, for me, it's still affordable. So that's important because...
Well, Frits, you moved here in 2019 and you just applied for permanent residency, which we'll get to. But let's start from the beginning. Why did you move to Portugal and where did you move from?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The why, because many people ask that. We actually moved from Hong Kong, and as you said, in 2019. In 2016, 2017, we were sort of thinking, okay, where are we going to go after Hong Kong? And we really wanted to go to Europe, or back to Europe, because I'm from the Netherlands originally. For me and for us, it was like, okay, where do we go in Europe? So I didn't want to go to the Netherlands, too wet.
Okay, I was going to
Too
say, why
flat,
not? Yeah.
Too many cows. Yeah, we had a couple of good friends from Portugal, ex-colleagues. They lived in Singapore, so, talk to them. But for me, I want to go to a country where the weather is nice, where it's still affordable. And this may sound strange, but where neither of us in the family speaks the language. Because I felt, if I would go to France, I speak French. Germany, well, that's not warm anyway, but, I speak German. So I really wanted to go somewhere where we all had the same disadvantage.
Okay.
We all had to learn the language, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
it was like, okay. And I also speak a little bit of Spanish.
So that really narrowed it down.
And I'd never been to Portugal before when I lived in Europe, when we were here. So we decided, based also on the discussions that we had with friends from Portugal, let's just take a road trip. And that was in 2017. And so we first went to Lisbon, looked around, we went to the Algarve, went to Coimbra, and then we ended up in Porto. The first night we were walking around here and, my wife and I looked at each other and we said, wow, we love this place. This is it. It felt so good. Porto was really the place we wanted to stick in. Then the question was, when are we going to move? So what are we going to do? So the first thing, just to do a little bit of backtracking, really went here because one of our friends who was Portuguese said, I have a very good friend and he is a promoter, he's a developer, so he develops apartments. And I always buy a few apartments from him. He said he has a new project now, so I'm going to buy, and he showed it to us, and I was like, I've never been to Portugal. I'm not going to buy something, because of course we rented in Hong Kong, too expensive to buy. But we did have in the back of our minds the idea, it would be nice if we had some apartment in Europe
Like
that we could rent
investments.
out just as an investment. But we didn't want to spend too much money, so it was like, okay. So when we got to Lisbon, we looked around actually for apartments too, and we felt, and that was in 2017, at that time already, the things within our budget, we didn't really like. It was already getting expensive. So then we moved to Porto. I reached out to that friend, said, that developer you have, can you give me the details? So because he lived in Porto and he's developing in Porto. So we met him in one of the hotels here. He came to meet us and he showed us where he was going to build his next project. He said, yeah, that's actually really nice. Bonfim, it looks good. He hadn't started building yet. We like quick decisions. So in the spur of the moment, we said, okay, we'll take an option on one.
Okay, wow, you just did it.
Yeah, we did it. And then we went back home and we're like, what did we do? Anyway.
But it worked out.
But it worked out, yeah. That one actually got delivered in 2019. But then it was still more like, okay, in the long term, we're going to move to Europe. And Portugal seemed like a really good place to also retire. Well, I'm still working now. Then I changed jobs and I was on a global job basis. So I traveled everywhere. Basically, my job was traveling. And then we started thinking, we had a daughter that had to go to high school. And that was 2018, early 2018. And things were changing a little bit in Hong Kong. We felt there was much more Chinese influence. There was some strange vibes. So we were looking at each other like, are we going to stay like 6 more years here? Because I don't really want to move our daughter out of high school halfway through. Or are we going to see if we can get her to Portugal? Why not move now?
And it was already Portugal. You had already said
yeah,
when
we already said
move,
Portugal,
it'll be
yeah,
Portugal.
because we fell in love, the year before. So it was like, yeah, no other option. And we did also go to Spain and France, but just fell in love with Portugal and specifically with this area. So we started investigating, okay, so where can we live then? And it had to be either close to Porto Airport or Lisbon Airport because of my travel. I didn't fancy being in a car all the time. Obviously, it had to be Porto.
Yeah.
And then we had to find like an international school for her. So we took her with us in 2018, early 2018, a summer holiday. And we visited international school in Porto. Yes, she got preliminary accepted. And then we did another weird thing. We started looking for, where are we going to live? And this was all in a very short holiday. We met a really good real estate agent. He showed us some properties in Porto. And for us, coming from Hong Kong and before that in China, living in apartments all the time, we really wanted to have like a little bit of
More
outside.
space.
Yeah, a little outside. Not like a big garden or anything. And he and she was a couple. They showed us several options within Porto, and one we thought it was pretty expensive. Then they drove us to Gondomar, and there was a new project that was being developed there. They already had houses that were finished, but they were going to do one final batch of 5 houses. So it was townhouses, right? It's not a, but they had a townhouse with a free front, so it's a little side garden. So we thought, that's actually not so bad. And when we got there and walked around that area, a really quiet area, we felt really good.
You like that about it?
Yeah, and it was the same with the apartment the year before. If we can get this one, then let's do it. But we had to get a mortgage, so...
Okay, so you did get a mortgage, yeah, okay.
So we looked at it, we said, yeah, this is really great. And then we went back and with the real estate agent, looked at several options for mortgages and came back again at the end of 2018 to finalize everything. We had already sold the preliminary contract, but the financing. And then it was going to be delivered in 2019, and that's when we moved.
Was it delivered in 2019?
Well, it was delivered in 2019, but, it's Portugal.
Yeah.
So... It was going to be delivered in July, and our daughter had to start school in September in Porto. We came here in August, if I remember correctly, beginning of August. Then the house should have been ready, but it was actually ready later in September.
In September.
Not too bad. Well, actually, it was 2 months delayed, but we had to scramble to live in other places without spending too much money.
Yeah.
Because the apartment that we had bought was also delivered in 2019, early. And it was already rented out, so
you couldn't stay there.
I couldn't stay there. It was a bit of a hassle, and we moved from Hong Kong just with suitcases, so we just start from scratch. Just
So you were kind of living out of the suitcases for a bit until you actually got into your place in September. Yeah. And your daughter had started school before moving in.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's probably chaotic a little bit.
Yeah, it was a little bit chaotic. Another reason for it, because Gondomar, it's very close to Porto, right? And the international school is in actually close to Matosinhos. And there was kind of a little bit of a misjudgment from me because I looked at the Google Maps and I was like, okay, we're gonna have to have a car because we lived in Gondomar. There was no public transport where we lived, and that was fine because I didn't have a car in Hong Kong and I really wanted to have a car again. So I was like, this is my chance.
Yeah.
I looked at Google Maps and it was like 20 minutes to the school, so I thought.
Not terrible.
Not terrible.
Yeah.
But I should have looked in the morning traffic, right? So in the morning traffic, it was like more than an hour. So. It was
Oh no! So from Gondomar out to the school, sometimes it would take an hour.
Yeah, because you have to go, into past Porto. So luckily there is a direct bus close to from where we live.
Okay.
That goes actually to her school.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. So what I used to do after struggling a little bit with the traffic, after a year or two actually, when she was like, when I felt comfortable with her taking the bus. And it's really very safe, so I never had any worries. So I drove her to the bus station, which was just more 5-minute drive, and then she would take the bus, and she got out and she walked to school.
Okay.
So actually, that was good luck, I would say, because I would hate to have been driven all along. And of course, there was also the COVID time in between, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and would you take the bus home as well, or sometimes you'd go get her?
Yeah. No, usually take the bus because going back was even worse because then.
That afternoon traffic, rush hour, people wanting to get home and everything.
I had to be in traffic and going there and then getting traffic coming back. So not a good idea.
Yeah, that would be awful. Okay, so you didn't initially think Gondomar, but the place kind of found you because of the house and everything. Yeah,
the house and they did very tricky things. So they drove from, for those of you that know, Porto area. So they drove past the river, like Douro River. And then you get into Gondomar from that side, and then you go up a hill, and then our house is somewhere.
So you saw the river, and you were like,
this is like a holiday feeling, right? This is great, and you have the walking path there, and so we felt really, really nice. But also the area is really nice where we got the house. It's all local people. I know there's one couple from Brazil, but the rest is all people that either lived in Gondomar or people that moved from Porto to there. Our neighbor had an apartment in Porto, but he moved there. Just to be in more of a quiet area. Okay, yeah. It's really a local area, but really nice.
So then how's your Portuguese coming along?
Quite well. I can speak it properly. Well, properly, yeah. I can understand most of it. Writing, no. Sometimes very difficult to understand, especially when you have like working folks, people that are local, that have even a little bit of dialect, and then they speak really quick. Yeah. And it's like... Sorry, can you
slow down a little bit?
Slow down a little bit. And of course, the big advantage of Portugal is that most people speak English. So if you really can't figure it out, except for the government part, you have to do.
Of course, yeah.
You have to do in Portuguese. But yeah, no, so I basically also did all the contracts with real estate and the mortgage. I didn't have a lawyer, so I did everything, read the Portuguese. It makes you a little bit self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And my wife has more issues with it because it's much more difficult, because her native language is Mandarin and Cantonese, so it's much more difficult. But she just completed the A2 Portuguese course that you guys also did, I think. I
Oh,
saw
great,
on the,
yeah.
so she got her certificate.
Oh, congrats.
Yeah, so she's now heading towards the citizenship as well.
Does she need to get that for permanent residency?
We hear different things. So I'm not 100% sure, but we did it anyway. Because she's married to me and I'm a EU citizen, so she has a residence card that is, a spouse of a EU citizen. Was valid for 5 years. So I don't think she needs it, but if she wants to get a passport, which she does want to have, then she will need it. So she did it anyway because she also wanted to learn Portuguese. I mean, we live in Portugal, right?
Right, yeah, so it's a good way to learn, get that certificate for just anything legal documents later on.
Yeah, I always try to, also in Hong Kong, we were never really expat community. I know this is expats everywhere, right? but I try to stay local. In Hong Kong, we also lived in an area with very few expats, in China as well. Just then you get a real experience, I think, of a
being
country.
in the culture.
Yeah.
Okay, so recently you did the permanent residency.
Yep.
What was that like? What process did you have to go through to get that?
As you know, or for those of you who don't know, but IMA is the new CEF in Portugal. When we first got to Portugal, I got a contact from a direct email address of somebody at CEF. So before we moved to Portugal, and this guy was so helpful. So I asked a lot of questions by email, he always responded, and it was great. And we actually got our first cards in his office in Viana do Castelo.
Okay,
so
yeah,
went
so
all the
up
way
there,
there.
yeah, that's easier.
Yeah, because it was like, oh, I help you, and we had a few issues, so he helped us out really well. 5 years was up last February to make an appointment to get your permanent residency. Well, that wasn't that easy. So actually, that's the first time I got a lawyer to sort of get her to help make the appointment. I don't know if that really helped, but anyway, she secured an appointment in February, so that was good.
Yeah.
It was all the way in Santarém, so I had to drive 2.5 hours to get there. And the process was very seamless. I had my crew as a EU citizen, right, which I got here from City Hall. I went there, spoke with the folks there, and submitted papers. The papers were pretty straightforward because I work in Portugal. There wasn't really that much of a challenge. I took my house papers. Having said that, I think so, because I haven't got the card yet, right?
Okay,
It's
so
not June, so...
the appointment seemed fine.
It's May.
Simple documents, but and it seemed like it was okay, but you're still waiting on the actual card.
Yeah, and my wife couldn't get an appointment until middle of June. So, and again, the same place. So we go there.
Okay. Yeah.
Again. But yeah, I don't have my card yet. So, but I assume it's okay.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason why it shouldn't be.
Yeah. Are you worried or?
No.
It
No.
just kind of is what it is, right?
It is what it is, and it takes time. Some things in Portugal are really, really well organized. I was really impressed around the whole COVID time and the way how disciplined it was, and it was really fantastic. Also, the whole finances. Submitting your invoices, and you can check everything, and everything is online basically. So fantastic. Some things take a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Yes.
It is what it is, right?
It is what it is. Yeah.
Okay, so you're still working.
Yeah.
Do you plan on retiring here, or this is a bit of like, we'll stay here for a little bit, go somewhere else, or could you see yourself retiring here?
We will retire here.
Okay.
Yeah. It was sort of the going in position when we originally bought the apartment, like, okay, because 6-7 years later we're going to retire, or 8, or whenever I feel like it. And then we have sort of a base in Portugal because we fell in love with Portugal. But we're going to stay here. Going to retire here. Probably just going to live in the house that we have, the townhouse. Maybe look for a little bit of land to do a little bit of agricultural stuff, because I always had this vision of making wine,
Oh, okay.
but I think it will stay a vision. But
Well, you never know.
You never know. But also those prices have gone up. It's really crazy, because I remember when we got it in 2017 and you would look at like the Idealista, the website where they have all the houses for sale. You really had to struggle to find a house that was more than $1 million in the country.
Yeah,
right?
And now it's so different.
And now you have to struggle not to find a house over $1 million in any city, right?
Right.
I mean, you have very cheap houses, of course. Our house is also not $1 million, but far from it. But it really changed a lot in 6, 7, 8 years.
Well, you mentioned that you would retire here. So what are some reasons you would retire in Gondomar in Portugal specifically?
Portugal is a good basis to travel Europe. Like I said, we have a dog. I've been flying most of my life, so I really don't like flying that much anymore.
Okay.
So the vision that we have is after we retire, we take the car and we make like road trips with the dog and just go places. Portugal, for me, it's still affordable, so that's important because if I go to Holland sometimes, or any other country I go to. Go to the grocery shops. It's much more expensive. Even though the price has gone up here, but it's still better than the rest of Europe. You have a beautiful country. You have beautiful people. You have great wine. You have beautiful weather. Although, of course, in Porto in the winter it can be rainy, but even that's okay, right? I mean, retiring here, well, we have an apartment that generates some money. I lived in the Netherlands for quite some years, but I have a huge pension gap. But I've been contributing to the Portuguese social security and pension system now for a number of years, so 7 years, 6 years. In Europe, it works like this, that if you work in one country and you build up pension there, or working life, contribute to social security, and you go to another country, then that adds up to...
It transfers over even if
it transfers over, not exactly, but to give you an example, in Portugal you need to work 15 years before you're entitled to a pension.
Okay.
So I will never make that. I will make it, but I'm not planning to.
Okay.
But if you work in another European country, then they look at the total and they say, okay, even though you worked 8 years in Portugal, because you worked total 40 years, as an example, you're entitled to the Portuguese pension, but then of course only the fraction of it.
So you're entitled to it, but you might not get the full amount.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and the Portuguese pension is actually probably, if your salary is reasonable, and I'm lucky that I moved here from another country, right? Because it's different if you're local and salaries are quite low. It's based on an endpoint system. So you actually, if you would work your whole life in Portugal, you get like 95% of your last salary will be your pension.
Okay.
Right? Yeah, that's not the case for me, but still, I get more pension from Portugal than I get from the Netherlands, from the state anyway. That should cover us financially, pay off the mortgage by the time I retire. That's the plan, so that's on the way. And then really the cost that we have is the car, travel, food, insurance.
So cost of living is comfortable when you're retired.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah.
Well, tell us about Gondomar. What are some pros and cons, things that you like and don't like?
Yeah, so like I said, what I really like is that it's very quiet. We live a little bit between Gondomar center and the Douro River, so there's sort of a stretch there. So the other side of the highway that goes from Gondomar to Porto. So what I really like, it's quiet. But it's also very close to facilities, but you do need a car.
Okay.
I do have an electric bike, but it is quite hilly. So,
Okay. So how often do you use it?
well, I haven't used it to my chagrin for a couple of years because I was a little bit patriotic. I bought a Dutch electric bike because I really like the styling. That company went bankrupt.
Oh no.
And so did my battery and other systems. So I only recently found out there was nobody around here that wanted to touch it. But I found a bike shop in Lisbon that actually repairs the electronics and get a new battery. So I'm actually have that scheduled for, whenever next time I'm in Lisbon.
To do that, yeah.
Yeah, I already took it out of my bicycle and now I still have to go there. So I don't use my bicycle the past 2 years. Much to my regret, because I used to take the bicycle by the Douro River, go to Porto. I take the car. Very close to us is a private hospital, which is pretty new. So we go there like for dentist, and I had an emergency a couple of years ago, and you can go there really quick. So I like to have that because it's close by. And then there's also all kinds of supermarkets, and they really developed Gondomar a lot. So that park that you showed in your video, that's recent, right? So that's new. They're going to have a metro, and they also did a lot of work with some parks. So very close to us, there's like you have a big walking path by the river. So we sometimes go there with the dog. But they also recently connected a couple of parks within Gondomar. So very close to us, there's like a walking bicycle path, goes up and down through a stream. And you can just walk that, and it goes all the way from Gondomar to the Douro River. So it's really nice. You're out in the nature.
Yeah. Okay. So
most
it's
of the time.
quiet.
Yes, it's quiet, and that was one of the reasons for Gondomar. So the quiet, but also close to the city.
Right.
Right. So I take my car, or we take an Uber because Uber is very cheap. So if we go out, we eat a lot. Well, actually, my wife is an excellent cook, so we eat a lot at home. But if we go to a restaurant and we don't go to Gondomar, the restaurant, and we go to Porto, then I typically take an Uber.
Well, at Expats Everywhere, we believe that living abroad transforms lives, and you've been living abroad for a while in different places. So how has that transformed your life?
Made me very open to other cultures. I always had to do that because of my job, because I traveled worldwide. So I did a lot of work in the US, Canada, but also in Asia, Southeast Asia, China, basically everywhere. So you always have to adapt to different cultures. And that helps you to better understand different cultures. I think if you never lived abroad or never really experienced abroad a lot, then if you move to another country, the tendency is to start complaining, right? It's like, this is slow and this is bad. And that's the one thing you shouldn't do. So what you should really do is say, okay, I'm in another country, so I'm going to be part of that country, right? That's why I say I wasn't an expat in Hong Kong, and I'm not really an expat here. I don't really have expat friends here. Not that I hate expats.
I didn't take it like that at all.
But, you're here, so I feel you need to be part of the culture. We like the culture here. People are so friendly. So that's also the reason retiring, where else would we go? It's a perfect place to spend the days and walk the dog or dogs, because my wife wants another one.
Ooh, okay.
Just have fun.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And if you want to see where Frits lives, another small place that's outside of Porto, but really good because it's quiet, then check out this video right here. Now, let's get moving.